You might be relying on writing habits that are inadvertently making your sentences weaker. Lucky for you, I spend my days editing these habits out of manuscripts. And in this video, I'm going to be exposing some of the sneakiest prose mistakes that I fix as an editor. We'll be working with some examples to show you exactly how to kick them out of your writing. You guys loved the first episode of this, so welcome back to Editor Fixes. I'm a full-time editor and my calendar is currently booked for the entire next year. Actually, it's probably overbooked if I'm being honest, which basically means that I spend a lot of time inside manuscripts and I do see these habits pop up constantly, no matter the writer's experience level. The good news is that fixing them makes a noticeable difference like overnight. Think of this video as another mini line edit session with me. Let's break down the next 4 mistakes. Okay, the first habit that we will be talking about will be structuring your sentences actively, and I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of this before. Let's start with a quick grammar check because someone asked me this on the last video. Actually, I got a couple of comments about it. And I do think it's a good question. What actually is a passive sentence? A passive sentence forces the object of the sentence into a role of a subject, which usually leaves us asking either by what or by whom. So let's start with an active sentence just so that you can kind of see the difference. And we will use a very simple, she cooked a lunch, because we have the she as a subject of the sentence. The subject is the thing that makes the action happen. Cooking is the action of the sentence, and dinner is the object of the sentence. The object has the action happening to it, so it is being cooked. Now, once we take that object, the lunch, and we try to force it into the role of a subject, and we put it at the beginning of a sentence, we get a passive sentence. The lunch was cooked, and this naturally prompts the question, by whom? So do you kind of see the problem there? The action feels unfinished because the focus is shifted away from the person or the thing who's doing the action. Do keep in mind that sometimes you want to hide the subject deliberately, and you want your reader to ask the question, by whom? You can use passive sentences purposely in some cases if, for example, you want to say that the door was left open because it immediately begs the question, who opened it and are they still there? It can also be a really good trick for just building tension, but if that isn't your purpose, then it's usually best to just keep these sentences active. So we do that by replacing the subject of the sentence with the person or the thing that's actually doing the action. We're not going to start with the object, which the action is being done upon, right? So we can say he cooks dinner instead of the dinner is cooked by him. Millie opens the door instead of the door is opened by Millie. Now, if you are using passive structure in order to build tension, like you don't want to reveal who opens the door before the door is actually open, we can still pull this off by keeping your sentence active. So you don't have to say the door is open to show Millie standing on the other side. Just use the door as your subject and tell us the door opens to Millie standing on the other side. It's a really small tweak, and you don't actually lose the journey of the sentence or that reveal, but it still sounds cleaner. Now, there's another version of this same issue that shows up all over manuscripts, and that is sentences that start with there is, there are, there was, or there were. They might not always be passive in the strict grammar sense, but they do weigh prose down in the same way. I personally look at these as a signal to passive description or static description, if you will. So instead of there was a chair positioned under the doorknob, we can just say a chair blocked the door. There were candles placed along the corridor, candles flickered along the corridor. So again, we're using that same trick where we locate the actual subject of the sentence and we place it at the beginning, and we give that subject a very clear and evocative action verb like blocked or flickered. It just feels sharper, more immediate, and more visual. That's the power of active sentence structure. The second habit that I want you to pick up is letting your verbs do the heavy lifting. One of the quickest ways to sharpen your prose is to stop leaning on adverbs to do all of the emotional heavy lifting. This could be phrases like walked angrily or cried loudly, and they aren't really wrong, but they are a little bit flat. They just tell us how something happened instead of showing us through the action itself. If you use a stronger verb, you can kind of carry that emotion and the movement just in one go. So instead of saying he walked angrily into the room, we can say he stomped into the room. It's a very classic example that I think you'll get when you talk about adverbs. And instead of she cried loudly, she sobbed. Now, these examples are a little generic on purpose, and that's okay for practice. But when you're in your own project, you get to be a little bit bolder and original with your word choices. So instead of reaching for the obvious, think about the exact flavor of the moment and what verb will give you the clearest, most vivid image. And remember, Verbs don't have to belong only to people. Personifying objects is a brilliant way to create atmosphere. So stuff like the floorboards groaned under her feet, or the vines hugged the walls, or shadows stretched across the floor, or trees loomed over him. So these verbs are very precise, very visual, and they bring your world to life. But, and this is important, you don't need to do this in every single line. Too much of it can very easily tip into purple prose where, everything feels overdone. Sometimes the strongest sentence is also the simplest. The trick is to choose your moments deliberately. And adverbs are not your enemy by any means, so you don't need to just cut each one out blindly. In my experience, I only really cut out adverbs where they just feel redundant or repetitive, or they weaken a sentence. So here's a quick exercise if you want to have a look at your own writing and try and do this. Open a page of your draft and highlight 3 adverb sentences. So things like whispered softly, or ran quickly, or smiled happily. And then rewrite each one with a single intentional verb that captures the mood. So do push yourself to go beyond the obvious stuff, but also trust yourself to know when just a plain simple verb will do the trick. Okay, the third tip and habit that I want you to pick up is to be specific instead of vague. A lot of writers fall back in the vague filler words just to move a scene along. So you'll get stuff like eventually, after some time, somehow, some way, practically, literally, kind of, sort of. These words don't usually add any meaning. They just water down the sentence and blur that image in your readers' heads. So we have this sentence: after some time, he left the building. So that doesn't really tell us anything, apart from the fact that time has passed and he left. And that's okay. In some cases that might work. But if we get specific, the scene becomes more visual and the pacing can be a bit sharper. So we can end up with something like: Marco checked his plastic wristwatch 3 minutes past noon before slipping out through the stairwell. Now the reader can picture the watch, hear the footsteps, and feel the clock ticking. And the specificity really grounds that scene. And this is really important if you are writing anything like a thriller, and your details may actually be important to lead your audience on. So here's another example. She somehow found her way to the river. We could turn that into: she followed the sound of rushing water until the trees opened up to the riverbank. So do you see the difference? We're not really left with a fuzzy somehow. We're shown exactly how it happened, which pulls us deeper into the world. And here's something important: you don't always have to explain the transition at all. So instead of writing a really vague filler beat like eventually, you can just hard cut to the next scene. Readers are smart enough to fill in that gap. If you do skip the filler, it often makes your pacing tighter and more confident. That said, specificity doesn't mean that you need to pull details out of thin air just to pad out the page. Over-detailing can also tip into overwriting and feel just as heavy as vagueness. So the goal with this exercise is not to add in more words, it's just to kind of choose the ones that actually matter, choose the details that matter to your project. So these will usually be things that reveal your character and build your atmosphere and kind of just push the scene forward. So when you revise, highlight those words like somehow, some way, practically, eventually, after some time, sort of, kind of, and ask yourself, do I need to replace this with a clear, purposeful image? Or can I just cut it and move on? That balance is what makes your prose immersive without bogging it down. Okay, and the last habit that we will be touching on today is one of my favorites, and that is the overuse of ing verbs or participles. So another sneaky habit that I see all the time in drafts is piling sentences with participles over and over and over again. So these are those ing verbs. And obviously, when you use them sparingly, they're totally fine. But when every other sentence is structured the exact same way and you have some kind of, grabbing, running, fumbling, smiling, whispering, nodding, the prose starts to feel samey, cluttered, and weirdly floaty. But the key thing to remember before we start with any of this is that participles only really work when two things are happening at the exact same time. So for example, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through the messages. That works because he can technically scroll it while pulling out the phone. But he unlocked the door walking into the room doesn't actually grammatically work because those actions don't overlap. He has to unlock the door first and then walk into the room. There's also another common place that writers overuse participles, and that is right after dialogue tags. So you will have stuff like I'm fine, he said, shrugging. Don't go, she asked, reaching for his sleeve. So these feel clunky because the action is kind of like dangling off the tag, and they're not wrong, of course, but they do make the speech tag kind of redundant. It means that you can literally just drop the speech tag and turn the phrase into an action beat. So the examples we had could be, he shrugged, I'm fine, or don't go, she reached for his sleeve. So these can be cleaner, stronger, and they can keep your dialogue dynamic. But just like with other fixes, don't go overboard. Cutting every ing verb will strip away the variety out of your prose. Sometimes a participle is actually exactly the right choice for the rhythm or the flow of your sentence or your whole paragraph. The trick is just to use them deliberately when the action is literally simultaneous or when just the cadence feels right. So a quick exercise for you, if you tend to do this, is to pick a scene from your draft and highlight every ing verb. Ask yourself, are these things actually happening at the same time, or am I just stacking actions? And then try rewriting at least half of these into clean past tense or present tense if you're writing in present tense, or action beats. So those are 4 more of the prose mistakes that I see as an editor. Relying on passive structures, letting adverbs do the work instead of verbs, watering things down with vague language, and overloading on ing verbs. Small tweaks, but they make a huge difference in how immersive and sharp your writing feels. Now, as I mentioned, my editing waitlist is already booked, but if you want to get this kind of line level insight, the best way to do that would be through my courses. Prose deals with exactly this kind of craft, and you can get it on its own or as a part of the Complete Novelist bundle. I will leave links in the description, and if you want reminders for whenever I release something else, you can also join my newsletter. And if you like seeing behind the scenes of creative projects, I actually have an announcement. My best friend and I are about to start creating an audio drama podcast. We're recording our process and we are going to be posting it at the end of the month. So if you are interested in the behind the scenes of actually creating a project, then stay tuned for that. I'm thinking we'll probably post like a 1 episode each month with our progress, and you guys will get to help us with some creative decisions along the way. I'm super excited for this actually because I've been wanting to collaborate with him for like a really long time. So before you go, let me know in the comments, which of these 4 mistakes do you catch yourself making the most? And do you want me to keep this series going and dive into a part 3? But until next time, trust your heart and the words will come.